Marcus Thorne didn't just guard a house, he guarded a dynasty. The Blackwood estate, sitting like a fortress carved from granite and old money on the cliffs overlooking the Atlantic, wasn't just a home for the Van der Zee family, it was a vault. And Marcus, the head of security, was the combination lock. He was a man built like a sturdy oak tree, not overly tall but wide at the shoulders with eyes the color of sea glass that had seen too much. He had done 3 tours overseas before settling into this bizarre world of gilded cages and terrified servants. He liked the structure. He liked the absolute certainty of his job. Protect Mr. and Mrs. Gideon Van der Zee, protect the estate, and above all, protect their privacy. Privacy in the Van der Zee world meant absolute silence. Every day, Marcus walked the perimeter, checked the hundreds of cameras, verified the biometric locks, and reviewed the logs from the sublevels. The estate was massive. 3 floors of Gilded Age splendor above ground, and 3 floors of highly secured, climate-controlled archives, utilities, and vaults below. Those sublevels were Marcus's true domain, and they were tighter than Fort Knox. He had a team of 6 men, all former military or high-level private security, but truth be told, Marcus was the only one who truly understood the sprawling, nervous system of the place. He lived and breathed the security protocols. He also lived and breathed the unspoken rules of the help. The staff at Blackwood were treated well, in the sense that they were paid handsomely and given clean uniforms, but they were also expected to be invisible. They were ghosts in cashmere sweaters, gliding through hallways, never making eye contact, never speaking unless spoken to. And then there was Elena. Elena Rodriguez was the head housekeeper, a woman who looked permanently etched with worry. She was maybe 45, but the decades of bending, scrubbing, and tiptoeing had aged her faster than the expensive wine in the Van der Zee cellar. Marcus respected her. She was professional, meticulous, and utterly silent. He knew, however, that her silence wasn't born of indifference, but of fear. A deep, abiding fear that governed her every move. That fear had a name: Sophia. Sophia was Elena's daughter, and she was the only child of any staff member allowed to live on the premises. This was a massive exception to the Van der Zee rules, and it had been granted only because Elena was indispensable and had nowhere else to go. Sophia was 16, and she was an anomaly. She was polite, quiet, and blindingly intelligent, but she was also a phantom. She wasn't allowed to use the main grounds, wasn't allowed near the pool, and certainly wasn't allowed near the main house except for a small designated staff area in the East Wing. She was homeschooled via online classes, and her world seemed to consist of a tiny room above the garage and the endless, terrifying scrutiny of the estate. The rumors about Sophia started subtly, like a persistent drip in the pipes. The other staff whispered, though never when Marcus was around. They talked about her unusual schedule. Sometimes she wouldn't be seen for days. They talked about the light in her room being on at 3 a.m. and the way Elena would clutch her hand just a little too tightly when she walked her to the staff entrance. Marcus dismissed it all as staff drama. His job was wires and walls, not gossip, but then things started happening in his domain. The sublevels. The sublevels were divided into 3 main sections. Sublevel 1 was the high-tech laundry, the massive commercial kitchen, and the staff lounge. Sub-level 2 held the wine cellar, climate-controlled naturally, and the extensive art storage vaults. Sub-level 3 was the critical infrastructure, the server farms, the backup generators, and the vast, seldom-used historical archives of the Van der Zee family. It was SL3 where the first irregularity occurred. Marcus was reviewing the environmental logs late one Tuesday night, sipping lukewarm coffee in his command center, a room designed to withstand a small missile strike. He was looking at the thermal scans of SL3, specifically the archive wing, which was kept at a steady, frigid 58 degrees Fahrenheit to preserve the paper. And there it was, a small, persistent, localized heat signature. It was centered deep in the oldest part of the archives, Section C, a place so dusty Marcus hadn't bothered to send a patrol through it in months. The temperature spike was only about 5 degrees higher than ambient, but it was regular. It cycled. It suggested something was running, or something warm was breathing, for long, consistent periods. Marcus frowned, tapping the screen. Electrical fault? Highly unlikely. The wiring in that section had been replaced 3 years ago. A small animal? Possible, but the sublevels were hermetically sealed and patrolled by ultrasonic deterrents. He cross-referenced the area with the motion sensors. Nothing. The sensors were calibrated to detect anything larger than a rat, and they were silent. "Pete," Marcus called out to the junior officer on duty. "Run a diagnostic sweep on Archive C, SL3. Check for HVAC anomalies." Pete came back 20 minutes later. "All systems nominal, sir. No pressure drops, no leaks. Temperature differential is still showing, though. Maybe a faulty sensor?" "Maybe," Marcus grunted, but he didn't believe it. The Van der Zees paid millions for a system that didn't have faulty sensors. He filed the report, but he didn't forget it. The anomaly persisted the next day, and the day after. It was always there, radiating a small, stubborn warmth in the cold heart of the estate. Then came the second anomaly, and this one was impossible to ignore. It happened in the kitchen storage on SL1. Chef Dubois, a volatile French transplant who treated truffles like newborn babies, reported a very specific theft. "My special reserve," Chef Dubois wailed, his face redder than a ripe tomato. "The ingredients for the pâté, the smoked eel, the imported saffron, and worst of all, 2 full pounds of the artisanal Gruyère, gone." The theft wasn't about the quantity, it was about the specificity. The Van der Zees ate like royalty, but they were also creatures of habit. No one on staff would dare steal such specialized, expensive items. They were monitored too closely, and besides, the staff food was excellent. Marcus reviewed the kitchen cameras. Nothing. The kitchen was locked down every night, and the access log showed only the night cleaning crew, all of whom had been vetted for years. He checked the inventory records. The items weren't just missing from the shelves. They were marked as used in preparation by a digital entry made at 1:17 a.m. "Wait a minute," Marcus muttered, looking at the digital timestamp. "The kitchen staff doesn't start prep until 4 a.m., and the cleaning crew doesn't log inventory." He pulled up the access log for the inventory system. The entry had been made using the generic kitchen terminal, but the entry itself required a specific staff keycard and a 4-digit override code. Marcus ran the code through the system. It didn't belong to the chef. It didn't belong to any of the sous chefs. It belonged to Elena Rodriguez. Marcus stared at the screen. Elena, the fearful, meticulous head housekeeper. Why would she be logging expensive ingredients at 1:17 a.m. and then stealing them? It made no sense. She had impeccable records, and she knew the consequences of theft were immediate termination and likely legal action. He called Elena into his office the next morning, a small, windowless room designed for difficult conversations. Elena walked in, looking like a deer cornered by headlights. "Elena," Marcus said, keeping his voice low and level, "we have a situation regarding the kitchen inventory." He showed her the log entry. Her already pale face went white. She didn't look guilty of theft. She looked terrified of being caught doing something much worse. I don't know what that is, Mr. Thorne," she whispered, her hands clasped tightly. "I haven't been in the kitchen after midnight, I promise." "The entry was made with your access card and your personal override code," Marcus insisted gently. "Elena, I need you to be honest with me. Did you take the food?" A single tear tracked down her cheek. She didn't answer. She just shook her head, a gesture of absolute denial mixed with absolute despair. "If you took it, We can handle it internally. If you are covering for someone, it will only get worse, Marcus pressed. Is it Sophia? At the mention of her daughter, Elena's composure shattered. She looked up at Marcus, her eyes pleading. Please, Mr. Thorne, she choked out. Please, don't look. Don't ask. I will pay for the food. I will work double shifts. Just, please, leave it alone. The desperation in her voice was raw and immediate. This wasn't about Gruyere. This was about survival. Marcus knew, in that moment, that he was looking directly at rule number 2 being tested. Never involve yourself in the staff's personal lives. But Marcus had always been a man who followed the rules of justice more closely than the rules of the house. He let Elena go, telling her he would investigate the possibility of a system hack, giving her a temporary reprieve. But the puzzle pieces were snapping, together, horrifyingly fast. A localized, persistent heat source deep in the unused archives of SL3. Specific, expensive food items stolen and logged by Elena in the middle of the night. And Sophia, the ghost child, who was rarely seen. The heat signature needed sustenance, and Elena was providing it. Someone was living in SL3. And if the Vanderzees found out, not only would Elena and Sophia be instantly thrown out, but Marcus, the trusted, infallible head of security, would lose his job, his reputation, and likely face legal consequences for negligence. That night, Marcus decided he couldn't wait for his team to find a faulty sensor. He had to see it for himself, and he had to do it when the estate was completely silent. Mr. and Mrs. Vanderzee were in Geneva for a major auction, which gave Marcus a window of maybe 72 hours. He waited until 2:30 a.m., when the skeleton crew was either asleep or confined to the command center. He disabled his personal body camera feed, a cardinal sin in his line of work, and left his radio on the desk telling Pete he was doing a manual audit of the generator backups on SL3, a plausible excuse. He took the service elevator down, the air growing colder and heavier the deeper he went. SL1 was humming with machinery. SL2 was quiet, smelling faintly of ancient parchment and dust. SL3 was different. It was oppressive. The emergency lights cast long, stark shadows down the endless corridors lined with metal shelving units packed solid with decades of Vanderzee history. Marcus moved with the silent economy of a predator. He was wearing soft-soled boots, and his flashlight beam was focused low. He bypassed the main security checkpoints for SL3 using his master keycard and a rotating biometric bypass code known only to him. He was heading toward Archive Section C, the coordinates where the thermal anomaly had been strongest. As he walked, the silence was broken only by the faint, high-pitched whine of the server fans miles away. He passed rows and rows of metal boxes, tax records, correspondence, photos of people long dead. Finally, he reached Section C. It was darker here. The air felt stale, trapped. He swept the flashlight beam around. Nothing immediately obvious. Just boxes and dust. But then he noticed it. Near the back wall, where the shelving met the reinforced concrete, there was a small, almost imperceptible gap between two towering metal units. It was too tight for a person to walk through, but it looked like the shelving units had been shifted, maybe 6 inches apart. Marcus put his shoulder against the first unit and pushed. It scraped loudly against the concrete floor, the sound echoing painfully in the silence. He paused, listening. Nothing. He pushed again, harder. The gap widened. He shone his light through the gap. Behind the shelves, there was a small, crudely constructed wall. It wasn't concrete. It was made of thick, industrial sound-dampening foam panels, held together with heavy-duty black tape. It was a deliberate concealment. Marcus felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. This wasn't just a squatter. This was an engineered hideaway, built to withstand thermal imaging and sound detection. He reached out and pulled gently on one of the foam panels. It slid away silently, revealing a narrow, dark opening. The air that rushed out was warm, humid, and smelled distinctly of wood smoke and something sweet, maybe burning sugar. Marcus drew his sidearm, standard protocol even though his gut screamed this wasn't an intruder scenario, and stepped through the opening. He found himself in a space roughly 12 by 12 feet, completely sealed off from the rest of the archives. It had been carved out of an old, decommissioned air-handling shaft. The heat was intense, and the walls were lined with heavy, insulated blankets stolen from the estate's maintenance stores. And then he saw the contents of the room. It wasn't a squat, it was a workspace. In the center, there was a small makeshift desk fashioned from 2 stacked milk crates and a piece of salvaged wood. On the desk were stacks of notebooks, thick textbooks on advanced mathematics and theoretical physics, and a small antique oil lamp providing a flickering yellow light. The smoke smell came from the lamp. There was a small, high-efficiency hot plate tucked into a corner, powered by an illegal tap into the main archive power line, the source of the thermal signature. Beside the hot plate was a half-eaten bowl of something that looked suspiciously like artisanal Gruyere melted over rice. This was Sophia's world. Marcus lowered his gun, his mind reeling. The sophistication of the setup was astonishing. The electrical tap was clean, professional. The sound dampening was nearly perfect. This was not the work of a scared teenager. This was the work of a genius trying to disappear. He moved further into the room, his flashlight sweeping across the walls. They were covered not with dust, but with complex equations written in charcoal. They looked like something out of a university lecture hall, filled with Greek letters and dense notation. Sophia was not just hiding, she was studying, at a level far beyond her online high school curriculum. Marcus turned the beam toward the far corner where a thick woolen blanket was draped over what looked like a cot. He took a slow, deep breath, tasting the dust and the stale, warm air. He knew he had just destroyed his career simply by being here, but he had to know the entire secret. He pulled back the blanket. The cot was empty. Marcus spun around, sweeping the small room with his light, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Where was she? He noticed a small, nearly invisible hinge near the floor, right where the foam wall met the concrete. It was another, hidden door, barely 6 inches high. He knelt down, feeling the cold air blast out from the tiny opening. He pushed the small hatch open. It led down into a narrow, dark shaft, an emergency maintenance conduit that ran beneath the concrete foundations of the estate. No human should be able to fit down there, let alone navigate it. Marcus peered into the darkness, his light beam swallowed instantly. "Sophia?" he whispered, his voice sounding huge and echoing in the tiny space. A small sound came back. Not a word, but a clicking, metallic noise, like a small, precise tool being used against metal. He was about to call out again to demand she come up, when his light caught something hanging just inside the conduit entrance. It was a thick industrial cable, cut cleanly through. It was the main fiber optic communication line for the entire estate, the line that connected the Van der Zees' private office servers to the outside world. And the clicking noise stopped. A small voice, tight with fear and determination, floated up from the darkness. It was Sophia. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "You shouldn't be here. You need to leave. If you tell them I'm here, my mother will lose everything. But if you try to stop me right now, I will cut the power to the whole estate." Marcus froze, the flashlight beam trembling, slightly. He wasn't looking at a scared teenager anymore. He was looking at a potential threat, and an impossible moral dilemma. "Sophia," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a low growl. "What are you doing down there? What are you holding?" There was a long silence. The air pressure shifted slightly, and Marcus heard the distinct sound of heavy machinery starting up, deep beneath the ground. Then Sophia answered, her voice suddenly strong, resolute and terrifyingly calm. "I'm finishing what they started," she said. "I am building my way out, and I just figured out how to use their old archive equipment to run a dedicated signal. I found a way to talk to the world, Mr. Thorne. I'm sending a message, and I think they're going to hate what I have to say." Marcus stared into the dark hole, realizing that the heat signature, the stolen food, and the impossible knowledge were all focused on a single, terrifying goal. This wasn't just a girl hiding from her circumstances. This was a girl preparing to launch a nuclear strike against the Vander Zee Empire from their own basement. He had just stumbled upon a secret that could collapse the entire Blackwood estate, and he was standing right in the blast zone. His job, his reputation, his freedom, all of it was on the line, and he hadn't even seen the full extent of the weapon. She was building. He just knew he had to stop her or protect her. He couldn't yet tell which one was the right choice. Marcus didn't move. Every instinct honed over decades of security work, from the dusty battlefields to the polished halls of Blackwood, screamed at him to secure the asset, neutralize the threat, and follow protocol. But the threat was a 16-year-old girl, and the asset was a fiber optic cable that could bring down an empire. He kept the flashlight steady, illuminating the dark, cramped opening. The air conditioning in this part of the sublevel was designed to keep the paper archives cold and still. The warm, stale air from Sophia's hideaway, mixed with the faint metallic scent of ozone and machine oil, felt like a physical weight pressing down on him. "You won't cut the power, Sophia," Marcus said, his voice quiet but carrying the absolute authority of a man used to being obeyed. "Because you know what happens next. The automated lockdown engages instantly. Armed response will be here in 3 minutes. You haven't just cut the power. You've sounded the biggest alarm this place has. Your mother will be found, questioned, and she will lose everything you are trying to protect." Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Marcus heard the rhythmic thump, thump, thump of the heavy machinery deep in. The conduit slow slightly, but not stop. It sounded like an ancient heart struggling to beat. "I have contingency plans, Mr. Thorne," Sophia finally replied, her voice still trembling but laced with surprising steel. "The power grid is segmented. I can disable the main security systems without triggering the full emergency broadcast. I just need 10 seconds. 10 seconds is all it takes for me to pull you out of there," Marcus countered. He knew she was bluffing, or at least operating on theory. Cutting power to the main security grid was a catastrophic failure, monitored by off-site third-party systems. It would be reported immediately. "Let's talk, Sophia," he urged, sliding the gun back into his holster, a calculated, visible gesture of de-escalation. "I came down here alone. I turned off my cameras. I risked my job just to see what was causing a 5-degree anomaly in the archives. Didn't report the stolen food, and I gave your mother a warning. I'm not the enemy here." He knelt by the small hatch, ignoring the protesting ache in his knees. "I understand you are brilliant. I understand you are desperate. But you are about to trigger an event that will ruin your mother's life and potentially put you in federal custody. That is not building your way out. That is self-destruction. Come out and show me what you are doing." There was a long, agonizing pause. Marcus held his breath, listening to the persistent thump, thump, thump of the machine below. Finally, the machinery noise ceased completely. "I can't," Sophia whispered. "It's tight down here. I'm almost stuck." Marcus felt a sharp stab of concern replacing his professional vigilance. "How long have you been down there?" 3 days, mostly," she admitted. "I only come up when my mother brings supplies." 3 days? Marcus shook his head in disbelief. "Sophia, you are going to get yourself killed in that confined space. Now, tell me how to get you out." She instructed him to reach into the conduit and feel along the left wall. He did, brushing against cold, damp concrete. His fingers found a small, recessed metal lever. "Pull it," she said. Marcus pulled. With a groan of ancient metal, a section of the concrete floor next to the small hatch lifted, revealing a much larger access tunnel, about 3 feet wide and 5 feet tall. It was clearly an old, forgotten maintenance passage. He shone his light down. Sophia was curled up, cramped, next to a bizarre collection of equipment. She looked tiny and frail, covered in dust and sweat, her dark hair plastered to her forehead. "I need your word, Mr. Thorne," she said, squinting up at the light. "You don't touch the equipment. You don't report the tap. And you help me clean up before my mother has to come down again." "You have my word," Marcus said, meaning it. He extended a large, steady hand down to her. Sophia hesitated for a second, then took his hand. He pulled her up and out of the tunnel. She was lighter than he expected, practically skeletal beneath the layers of dirt and oversized clothes. As soon as she was standing in the bunker, she moved past him with a jerky urgency, going straight to the makeshift desk. "You need to see this," she said, her voice shaking with exhaustion and pride. Marcus turned his attention from the girl to the project. The air handling shaft had been perfectly transformed. The heat was generated not just by the hot plate, but by the repurposed server array she had mentioned. "What is that noise I heard?" Marcus asked, pointing to the open-access tunnel. "That's the data mill," Sophia explained, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of a dirty hand. The Van der Zees decommissioned the old paper archive system in the late 90s, but they left the core infrastructure, the old magnetic tape drives and the processing units, down in that sub-sub level. They thought it was useless junk. She gestured toward her desk. But it wasn't useless, it was isolated. I spent 6 months mapping the wiring. I bypassed the modern network entirely and plugged into the original main transatlantic cable conduit, which runs right through that sub-tunnel. It's slow, but it's completely unmonitored by their modern security firewalls. Marcus walked over to the desk, looking at the textbooks. "You're sending a message," you said. "What kind of message requires advanced physics and a repurposed 1990s server farm?" Sophia sat down on the milk crate, pulling a thick, leather-bound book toward her. It wasn't a textbook, it was a ledger. "Mr. Van der Zee protects his privacy, right?" she asked, her sea-glass eyes fixing on Marcus. "He protects the estate. He protects the money." "That's my job, yes," Marcus confirmed. "Well, I found out where the money came from," she said, tapping the ledger. "My mother cleans the main house. I clean the archives. I spend time down here because it's the only place they forget I exist. I read everything." She slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a digital image, printed crudely on a small, battery-powered thermal printer she must have smuggled in. It was a scanned page from the ledger, full of names, dates, and enormous financial figures. "This is a record from 1957, Sophia explained, pointing with a long, thin finger. "It details the corporate shell structure used by Gideon Van der Zee's grandfather to acquire the land for the estate. Not just this land, but hundreds of thousands of acres up and down the coast. Land that belonged to farming communities, small fishing towns, and immigrant families who didn't speak English." Marcus looked closer. The names listed weren't typical business names. They were common Spanish and Portuguese surnames. "They didn't buy the land, Mr. Thorne," Sophia whispered, her voice tight with suppressed rage. "They used legal maneuvering, fraudulent tax, documents, and outright intimidation to seize it. They made these families sign away their deeds for pennies, then destroyed the original records. The Van der Zees built their dynasty on stolen equity, and they covered it up completely." Marcus felt a cold wave wash over him. This wasn't just corporate malfeasance, this was systemic, historical theft that would make national headlines. The Van der Zees' reputation would be annihilated. "And you're sending this ledger to the world?" Marcus asked, his throat dry. "Not just the ledger," Sophia corrected, pointing to the wall covered in equations. "I'm using their own data. They kept every single piece of paper, thinking the sheer volume would protect them, But I found the pattern. I cross-referenced the financial ledgers with the legal correspondence, the internal memos, and the original geographical surveys. She picked up a small, custom-built device, the source of the earlier clicking sound. It looked like a Frankenstein mix of old radio parts and circuit boards. "This is a custom encoder," she explained simply. "I'm compressing and encrypting every relevant document, thousands of pages, into a single, small data packet. I'm transmitting it using the old transatlantic cable as a dedicated signal path, timing it to hit a specific network of investigative journalists and legal aid organizations simultaneously." Marcus stared at the device, then at the girl. Her genius was terrifying. She hadn't just mastered the estate's systems. She had mastered its history and its vulnerabilities. She was an academic terrorist, and her weapon was the truth. The clicking noise, the machinery, Marcus realized. That wasn't just a server. It was a process of decryption and compilation. "Exactly," Sophia confirmed. "I need the processing power to compile the final package. It has to be perfect. If they find any way to discredit the data, the Van der Zees will win. It has to be irrefutable." "And the specific food?" Marcus asked, remembering the Gruyere and the smoked eel. Sophia managed a weak, exhausted smile. "Sustenance. High calorie, high protein. I can't leave the archives for long periods, and my mother can only bring so much. The Gruyere is the best source of fat." Marcus felt the last vestiges of his professional detachment crumble. He wasn't dealing with a thief or a vandal. He was dealing with a crusader, using the only tools available to her, her mind and the forgotten refuse of her oppressors. "You said you were building your way out," Marcus recalled. "This is it," Sophia said, her eyes burning with conviction. "If this data goes public, the legal backlash will be immediate. The estate will be tied up in litigation for decades. The Van der Zees will lose their reputation, their political influence, and potentially their assets. My mother will be free. I will be free. We won't be ghosts anymore." Marcus walked over to the small power tap she had installed. It was flawless, barely drawing enough current to register on the main grid, but enough to power her operation. He knelt down, examining the wiring. "When is the transmission scheduled?" he asked, his mind already shifting from head of security to tactical advisor. "I programmed it for a specific time," Sophia said, her voice dropping lower. "In exactly 48 hours. That's when Mr. Van der Zee is scheduled to appear at the European Economic Summit, the maximum media attention. 48 hours, and the Van der Zees were due back from Geneva in less than 72. Marcus had a narrow window. He stood up, looking around the small, hot room. He was complicit now. He had heard the secret, seen the evidence, and touched the weapon. He could still trigger the silent alarm, but the thought felt morally repugnant. He had always believed in order, but the order of the Blackwood estate was built on a lie. "We have to shut it down," Marcus stated, not as a command, but as a necessary operational step. "Not the project, the system. We need to clean this room. Now. Before the night watch shift changes." Sophia looked terrified. "But the compilation? If they find this room, the data is irrelevant," Marcus cut in sharply. "They will seize the server, destroy the evidence, and disappear you and your mother. We prioritize survival, Sophia." He pulled out his multi-tool, a heavy, specialized instrument. "Show me how to disconnect the power tap without leaving a trace of the bypass." Working quickly and efficiently, they began the dangerous work of dismantling the bunker. Marcus was amazed by Sophia's technical knowledge. She directed him on which wires to cut, how to reseal the power line to make it look untouched, and how to safely power down the custom encoder. As they worked, Marcus asked about the equations on the wall. "They're models," she explained while carefully peeling the thick industrial tape off the foam panels. "To predict network traffic and transmission vulnerability. I needed to ensure the data packet would be large enough to be taken seriously, but small enough to be transmitted quickly and survive any immediate sniffing attempts by the Vanderzee IT team. You built an entire communication strategy based on theoretical physics and old technology, Marcus murmured, genuinely impressed. I had nothing but time and access to their junk, she shrugged. If you're invisible, you can see everything. It took them nearly 2 hours to completely dismantle the hideaway. They carefully stacked the sound-dampening foam, the blankets, and the milk crates. Sophia packed her notebooks and the small printer into a sturdy canvas bag. The final, most critical piece was the repurposed server array in the subtunnel. Marcus shone his light down there again. "We can't move that machinery without heavy equipment," he said. "We don't need to move it," Sophia replied, taking a small specialized component from her bag. "I just need to decouple the data mill from the transatlantic cable and make sure the mill's internal memory is wiped. They won't look for a working server here. They only look for data leaks on the modern network." Marcus watched as Sophia, with the delicate precision of a surgeon, used the component to execute a complex series of commands on the server core. Within 10 minutes, the machine was silent, cold, and inert. "It will look like a total system failure from 1998, she confirmed, sealing the small hatch on the floor of the tunnel. "No residual data, no trace of the tap." Marcus resecured the metal shelving units, pushing them back together until the gap was imperceptible. He even swept the floor with a specialized dust brush he kept in his kit, removing the tiny particles of foam and charcoal. When they were done, Archive Section C looked exactly as it had before, dusty, cold, and utterly forgotten. "You still have the encoder," Marcus noted, looking at the canvas bag. "And the data. Where are you keeping it?" "It stays with me," Sophia stated firmly. "It's my insurance. If anything happens to my mother or me, the transmission is set to automatically trigger after 72 hours of no input from me." Marcus nodded slowly. She was brilliant, but she was also ruthless. "All right," Marcus said. "I need you to go back to your room above the garage. Go to sleep. Do not leave. Do not log online. Act completely normal." "And you?" she asked. "I have to go back to the command center and delete every log of me being down here," Marcus replied. "I need to ensure no one sees the gap in my body cam feed, and then I have to talk to your mother." He escorted Sophia back through the labyrinthine corridors of SL3, up the service elevator, and across the silent grounds to the garage apartment. As they reached the door, he stopped her. "Sophia," he said, his voice low, "if you go through with this, there is no going back. The Vanderzees are incredibly powerful. This will not just be a lawsuit. They will try to destroy you." "I know, Mr. Thorne," she said, looking up at the massive, dark house looming over them. "But they have already destroyed everything else." She slipped inside, and Marcus watched the light go on in her window. He returned to the command center, heart pounding against his ribs like a drum. He walked into the climate-controlled room, where Pete was still monitoring the feeds, half asleep. "Audit complete, Pete," Marcus said, his voice steady. "Generator backups nominal. You can log off in 10 minutes. "Yes, sir," Pete mumbled, stifling a yawn. Marcus sat down at his console. First, the cleanup. He carefully excised the 2 hours of missing body cam footage, replacing it with a loop of static archive footage. A common glitch in the system, easily explained. He deleted the access log showing his entry into SL3. He even went into the thermal data and manually adjusted the calibration of the sensors in Archive C, creating a plausible explanation for the 5-degree spike. A slow, predictable sensor drift. He was a master of his craft, and within an hour, the digital evidence of his transgression was gone. He was still the infallible head of security. On paper, at least. But the real evidence, the knowledge of the truth and the physical data packet, was still active. He waited until Pete had left the command center, replaced by the next shift supervisor, a man Marcus trusted implicitly and whose attention was mostly focused on the exterior perimeter. Marcus stood up. He knew where Elena slept, a small, dedicated staff suite on the first floor of the East Wing. It was 5 a.m. Dawn was just beginning to paint the Atlantic horizon gray. He found Elena sitting bolt upright in her small bed, fully dressed in her simple gray uniform. She hadn't slept at all. She was clutching a worn, silver crucifix. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with terror. "Mr. Thorne," she breathed, scrambling to sit up, straight. "Did you find—" "I found her." Marcus cut her off gently, closing the door behind him. "And I found the room. And I found out what she is doing." Elena put her face in her hands, silent sobs racking her thin frame. "I knew it. I told her. I begged her to stop. But she is so smart, Mr. Thorne. So angry. I tried to feed her, tried to keep her quiet, but she just kept going down there." "She is magnificent, Elena," Marcus said, pulling up a small wooden chair. "She has built a ghost network right under my nose. She has the capability to expose the Van der Zees for decades of theft." Elena raised her head, her face streaked with tears. "And now you will report us." "I understand. Just please, let me speak to her first." "I'm not reporting anything," Marcus said, his voice firm. "I covered our tracks. I dismantled the physical evidence. I deleted the logs. We are clean, for now." Elena stared at him, unable to comprehend. "Why? Why would you do that? You will lose everything." "Because I read the ledger, Elena," Marcus stated simply. "I saw the names. My mother's side of the family were farmers in upstate New York. We lost everything to corporate greed in the 80s. I know what it feels like when the powerful decide you don't matter." He paused, looking her straight in the eye. "I spent my life protecting the Van der Zees. Lies. I'm done. I'm protecting the truth now, and I'm protecting you and Sophia." A wave of relief and disbelief washed over Elena's face. She struggled to speak. "But we are not safe yet," Marcus continued, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "The data packet is still active. Sophia plans to transmit it in 48 hours. The Van der Zees are due back the day after that. If they arrive and the news breaks while they are here, we are trapped." "What do we do?" Elena asked, leaning forward, suddenly energized by hope and fear. "We have to get Sophia and that data packet out of the estate before the transmission happens," Marcus explained. "If the packet is released while she is physically on the grounds, they will know immediately she is the source. They will have her arrested, or worse, they will make her disappear. We need to move her, and we need to do it without triggering any alarms." The challenge was colossal. The Blackwood estate was designed to be inescapable. Every exit, every gate, every service road was monitored by multiple layers of security, all reporting directly to Marcus's command center. "I can't just walk her out the front gate," Marcus mused, running a hand over his tired face. "The staff entrance is monitored. The garage exit is monitored. Every vehicle is tracked by GPS." He needed an anomaly. A blind spot. Something only he knew about. The delivery system, Marcus suddenly realized, snapping his fingers. The delivery system for the wine vaults on SL2. The Van der Zees had a massive, climate-controlled wine cellar, and they frequently received incredibly high-value shipments, cases worth tens of thousands of dollars. To protect this inventory, they had built a highly secured, dedicated freight elevator and a specialized, armored, loading bay that bypassed the main perimeter security fences. "It's used once a month, maybe," Marcus explained to Elena, his mind racing through the logistics. "It's a small, external loading dock on the cliffside, disguised as a utility shed. It requires my master key and 2 specific biometric overrides to activate the freight lift and the main door. And the cameras on that side are notoriously unreliable due to the sea mist, a flaw I deliberately never fixed." Elena listened intently, her eyes wide. "When can we do it?" Tonight, Marcus decided, the night shift is the leanest. We will need to move quickly, and we need a distraction. He looked at Elena. You will be the distraction. You need to create a plausible major emergency on the opposite side of the estate, something that draws all my men away from the East Wing and the command center, something that requires physical intervention. Elena's face hardened with resolve. I can do it. I will do whatever is necessary. Good, Marcus said, standing up. Now, you get ready for your shift. Act normal. Look tired, but professional. I need to spend the day doing what I always do, auditing the system, making sure my cleanup job is perfect. He left Elena's room, the weight of the conspiracy settling heavily on his shoulders. He was no longer the guardian of the Blackwood estate. He was its saboteur. Marcus spent the next 12 hours in the command center, meticulously reviewing logs, barking normal orders, and ensuring his team saw nothing unusual. He kept checking the thermal scans for Archive C, watching the temperature remain frigid and normal. But as the day wore on, Marcus started to feel a prickle of unease. He couldn't shake the feeling that Sophia had held something back. She had been too quick to agree to dismantle the bunker, too calm about the 48-hour deadline. As the sun set, casting long, crimson shadows across the polished marble floors of the estate, Marcus slipped away from the command center for a final, critical check. He went back down to SL3, back to Archive Section C. He pushed the shelves apart, confirming the bunker was gone. It was. But as he swept his flashlight over the concrete floor where the desk had been, he saw a faint scratch mark. Not on the surface, but a tiny score mark that led to a small, almost invisible pinhole in the concrete, covered by a speck of dust. Marcus knelt, blowing the dust away. He realized it wasn't a pinhole. It was a tiny, recessed lens. He pulled a specialized scope from his kit and looked through it. The lens was connected to a fiber optic thread, barely thicker than a human hair, running directly into the concrete foundation. Sophia hadn't just built a temporary bunker, she had installed a permanent surveillance tap. And she was still transmitting. The 48-hour deadline was a lie. The compilation was still running, transmitting in tiny, undetectable bursts through this hair-thin line, likely utilizing the ground vibrations and power fluctuations of the entire estate as a carrier wave. She hadn't stopped the project. She had just moved it deeper underground, to a place where Marcus could never physically reach it without explosives. Marcus stood up slowly, a cold understanding flooding him. Sophia hadn't trusted him completely, and she shouldn't have. She had used him, the head of security, to clean up the messy, visible evidence, allowing her to finish the final, undetectable phase of her transmission. The truth was still going out, right now, beneath his feet. He was running out of time. The mission had changed from exfiltration to exfiltration and immediate neutralization of the data source. He couldn't risk leaving the estate until the threat was absolutely severed. He looked at his watch. 10 Hakur p.m. Time to set the plan in motion. He radioed his team. Attention, all units. We have a confirmed breach of the perimeter fence on the southwest property line. Highly probable animal intrusion. Could be large deer or coyote. Send 2 men to investigate and report back. The southwest perimeter, the exact opposite side of the estate from the wine vault loading dock. Marcus had bought himself 10 minutes of distraction. He reached for his master keycard. He had to get Sophia out now, and he had to sever that hidden fiber optic thread no matter the cost before the Vanderzees returned home. And the cost, Marcus knew, was going to be everything. Marcus didn't wait for his men to confirm the coyote breach. He knew Pete and the other officer would be jogging through the wet grass for the next half hour, chasing shadows created by the sea fog. He radioed Elena, his voice tight. Phase 1. Execute now. Remember, it has to be catastrophic, but not immediately life-threatening. Maximum noise, Minimum collateral. Elena didn't hesitate. Marcus heard the static crackle on the other end, then a sharp, metallic clang. He was already moving toward the garage apartment. He found Sophia waiting by the window, her canvas bag containing the encoder and the data packet clutched tight. "You knew I was still transmitting," Marcus stated, not as an accusation, but as a fact. Sophia met his gaze, her eyes surprisingly clear. "If I had told you the truth, you might have felt obligated to follow protocol, Mr. Thorne. I couldn't risk it. The transmission is slower this way, but it is untraceable. I just needed the visible evidence gone." Marcus nodded slowly. She was not just smart, she was a master manipulator, capable of tactical deception that would impress a 5-star general. "We don't have time for a full security sweep then. We are running blind." They started moving. The internal service hallways were tight, smelling of bleach and industrial cleaner. Marcus walked ahead, his senses hyper-alert, moving like water, around obstacles. As they reached the junction leading to the central wing, a high-pitched, insistent alarm began to shriek from the security panel on the wall. It wasn't the main fire alarm, it was the dedicated industrial pump failure warning for SL1. "Major flooding in the laundry and boiler room." Marcus heard the night shift supervisor, a man named Henderson, yell over the radio. "Need all available personnel. Shut down the main electric. Grid in that sector. Get the emergency pumps started." Elena had done it. The sound of running feet and shouting voices echoed from the west wing, drawing all remaining attention away from the silent eastern half of the estate. Marcus pulled Sophia into a dark alcove. "Go, go, go," he muttered, pushing her toward the seldom-used staff staircase that led down to SL2. SL2 was colder than the other levels, designed to keep the wine and art stable. They moved past the massive climate-controlled vaults, the silence here broken only by the hum of the dehumidifiers. "The loading dock is through here," Marcus whispered, leading her toward a reinforced door marked Freight Access Only. He pulled out his master keycard. Swish. The first lock disengaged. Next, the biometrics. Marcus placed his hand on the scanner. The machine whirred, verifying his identity. "Access granted. Head of security." The heavy door slid open, revealing a short concrete tunnel leading to the freight elevator shaft. "Listen to me, Sophia," Marcus said, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "The truth is still leaking out. That fiber optic tap, it's running along the high-power conduit for this freight lift. When we activate the lift, I have to neutralize that line. It will be loud, and it will destroy the lift's motor. We have to be gone before the resulting alarm triggers Henderson." Sophia looked pale, but determined. "How will you neutralize it?" "A controlled overload," Marcus explained, pulling a specialized, heavy-duty electrical shunt from his toolkit. It was designed for large-scale power diversion, not sabotage. It will fry the line and the tap instantly, but it will also cause a localized seismic shock. They stepped into the freight lift. It was large, designed to hold pallets of wine. Crates. Marcus hit the button for the ground level, the exterior loading bay. The lift groaned, beginning its slow, agonizing ascent. Every foot felt like a mile. As the lift climbed, Marcus pulled open the lift's internal maintenance panel. The thick, high-voltage copper lines for the motor were exposed. "Stay clear of this panel," he instructed Sophia. He located the point where the power conduit entered the wall, the exact area where Sophia had planted her micro-tap. He could practically feel the faint, high-frequency vibration of the ongoing transmission. "Now or never," Marcus muttered. He jammed the heavy electrical shunt onto the main power line, completing the circuit with a controlled burst of energy. The effect was instantaneous and violent. A blinding flash of white light erupted from the panel, followed by a deafening crack that sounded like a rifle shot fired in a concrete room. The air instantly filled with the acrid smell of burning metal and ozone. The freight lift shuddered violently and stopped dead between floors. The power surge had worked perfectly. Marcus felt a faint, deep tremor in the concrete wall. The precise vibration needed to sever the hair-thin fiber optic cable running beneath the surface. The transmission was dead, but the resulting alarm was immediate. Security breach. SL2 freight access. Failure. Red alert. The automated voice screamed through the estate speakers. We're stuck, Sophia yelled, terrified as the emergency lights flickered on, bathing the lift in a sickly red glow. Not for long, Marcus said, already working on the internal manual release for the lift door. He ripped the release lever and with a painful screech of metal, the door groaned open. They were halfway between SL2 and the ground floor. Jump, Marcus ordered. They scrambled out of the stalled lift and onto a narrow maintenance ledge. Marcus pulled out his sidearm, not to shoot, but to use the butt of the gun to smash the emergency access lock on the outer loading bay door. This is the external utility shed, Marcus explained, his breath coming in ragged gasps. It leads outside. Run, Sophia. Don't look back. He kicked the door open. They burst out into the cold, salty air of the Atlantic. Night. They were on a tiny, reinforced loading dock carved into the cliff face, hidden from the main grounds by thick scrub brush and the sheer drop. The wind howled, carrying the faint, distant sound of sirens. Not police, but the estate's internal emergency vehicles rushing toward the SL1 laundry crisis. We need to get off the property line, Marcus shouted over the wind. He had parked his personal beat-up pickup truck, a vehicle too old to have a GPS tracker, a quarter-mile down the winding public access road. We run along the cliff trail, Marcus instructed. It's rough, but it bypasses the main perimeter fence. They scrambled up the embankment, Sophia surprisingly agile despite her exhaustion. Marcus followed, pausing only long enough to look back at the Blackwood estate. It sat dark and silent, except for the frantic red flashing lights around the laundry wing. He had just destroyed the security system he had spent 5 years perfecting. He was a fugitive, a traitor, and possibly facing federal charges, but he felt lighter than he had in a decade. They reached the road just as the first glimmer of dawn broke. Marcus unlocked his truck, shoved Sophia into the passenger seat, and floored the accelerator, peeling out onto the coastal highway. He drove for 2 hours, heading south, putting as much distance as possible between them and the estate. Sophia, exhausted but triumphant, finally fell asleep, the canvas bag containing the weapon resting on her lap. Marcus pulled into a dilapidated roadside diner in a small New Jersey town, a place far from the gilded cages of the Van der Zees. He called Elena from a payphone. We're out, he told her simply. The transmission is dead, but the data is secure. Elena's voice was shaky with relief. They found the laundry room. They know it was sabotage. They are reviewing the access logs for SL2. They know you were the last one down there, Marcus. I know, he replied. They will be looking for me. They will be looking for Sophia. You need to tell them you saw nothing. You were busy with the flood. I am resigning, Elena stated firmly. I told them I can't handle the stress. I am packing my bags now. I will meet you. Marcus gave her the coordinates of the diner. Hurry, Elena, before the Van der Zees get home. The Van der Zees returned from Geneva less than 12 hours later. Gideon Van der Zee, a man whose face was usually carved from granite, was reportedly apoplectic. The head of security had vanished. The housekeeper had quit. The laundry room was flooded. The freight lift was fried. And, most damningly, the meticulous digital logs showed Marcus Thorne was the last person to access the SL2 freight area. Marcus Thorne, the unblemished, infallible guardian of the dynasty, was gone. They launched a massive, private manhunt, trying to locate Marcus and Sophia, assuming they had stolen valuables or were attempting to extort the family. But they were looking for the wrong thing. Exactly 48 hours after Marcus first found Sophia's bunker, the original deadline she had given him, the world received the message. It happened during Gideon Vander, DZ's opening remarks at the European Economic Summit. As he stood on the podium, talking about corporate responsibility and historical lineage, his words were drowned out by the flashing headlines erupting across every major news network worldwide. Leaked ledgers. Expose Van der Zee dynasty built on massive land fraud. Centuries of theft, the secret history of the Blackwood estate. Sophia's data packet, perfectly compiled and encrypted, hidden the global network like a tactical nuclear strike. It wasn't just the scanned ledger, it was the cross-referenced internal correspondence, the fraudulent tax filings, and the geographical surveys, all proving that the Van der Zees had systematically stolen land from vulnerable communities for generations. The chaos was immediate. Gideon Van der Zee was pulled from the stage. Lawyers swarmed the Blackwood estate. Federal investigations were launched in 3 states. Marcus, Elena, and Sophia watched it all unfold from a small, dingy motel room hundreds of miles away. Sophia, finally safe and validated, looked like a different person. The fear was gone, replaced by a quiet, fierce satisfaction. "It worked," she whispered, staring at the television screen showing footage of the frenzied journalists outside the Blackwood gates. "It worked," Marcus agreed, taking a long sip of lukewarm coffee. Elena was packing the few things she had managed to bring with her. She looked at Marcus, her eyes full of gratitude and concern. "They will never stop looking for you, Marcus," she said softly. "They will want to know who helped her." "They will assume I did it for money or revenge," Marcus shrugged. "They can't comprehend that I did it because it was right. I am gone, Elena. Marcus Thorne, head of security, died in that freight lift. Oak explosion." He had sacrificed his career, his considerable savings, which he had wisely moved out of their joint accounts days ago, and his comfortable, structured life. But he had finally served a purpose that mattered. The Van der Zees spent the next few months battling a tidal wave of litigation. The data was irrefutable. Class action lawsuits were filed by the descendants of the wronged families, demanding restitution and the return of the stolen land. The Blackwood estate, the fortress carved from granite and old money, was tied up in legal injunctions and investigations. Marcus, Elena, and Sophia disappeared into the vast anonymity of America, moving often but always together. Marcus used his military training and security expertise for legitimate, low-profile jobs, mostly consulting for small, ethical firms. Elena found work managing small hotels. And Sophia? Sophia never stopped studying. 1 year later, Marcus was sitting in a quiet, sun-drenched cafe in the southwest, reading a local newspaper. Elena was across from him, sipping tea, looking relaxed for the first time in her life. Sophia, now 17, was not with them. She was in a nearby university library, auditing advanced courses in data science and legal theory. She was still a ghost, but this time by choice. Marcus flipped the newspaper to the financial section. A small article caught his eye. Van der Zee family forced to liquidate major assets. He smiled, a rare, genuine expression. "You know," Marcus said to Elena, stirring his coffee, "I used to think my job was protecting the walls, keeping the bad things out." Elena smiled back, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "Now you know the bad things were already inside the walls." He looked out the window at the endless, open horizon. No fences, no cameras, no biometric locks, just the open road. "Yeah," Marcus agreed, "but we found a way out, and we left them something to remember us by." He put down the paper, the final chapter of the Blackwood estate written not in dust and centuries-old paper but in digital fire, authored by a genius Maid's daughter and protected by the only honest man in the house.